as we listen to some delightful birds in the background and meditate on the meaning of life and being together, I'd like to thank you for joining us as we continue the journey to 50. We are so grateful for the generous funding from WRJ's Yes Fund, which is directly supporting tonight's program. And in addition, we are proud to be grantees of the Jewish Women's Fund of Atlanta and the SRE Network, Safety, Respect, Equity Network. We hope that you've enjoyed the journey so far as we continue to journey to the anniversary of Rabbi Sally Priestand's ordination, June 3rd, marking 50 years since 1972, and therefore 5 decades of women in the rabbinate, and opening that door to a definition of Jewish leadership, and especially the rabbinate, that is so much broader and continues to broaden in beautiful, expansive ways. We hope that you'll join us for our ultimate program on June 2nd, when we celebrate the anniversary. We're calling it, just for fun right now, Erev Anniversary, because it will be the day before, because the actual anniversary happens on Friday. And we'll be meeting at 7:30 yet again, June 2nd. And afterwards, for WRN members only, there'll be a festive oneg as well as board installation happening after the regular presentation and celebration. I'd like to thank Rabbi Beth Clafter, one of our co-presidents with Rabbi Emily Siegel. We want to thank Rabbi Clafter for organizing the entire speaker series and doing a fabulous job. And specifically for tonight, we want to thank Rabbi Jen Gubitz and Rabbi Julie Bressler for their work on tonight's program. Before we dive in, I want to just join together and lift our prayers to the people of Ukraine. We continue to hold them in our hearts and our prayers for the possibility of peace, the movement towards peace. May they know peace again. And here locally, as we gather as a community, we recognize the fear and trauma of the impending Supreme Court decision to take away our human, our health, and religious rights concerning abortion choice and reproductive choice. We hope that you will join and or support a local rally this coming weekend, or perhaps join in the great outpouring that is going to be in Washington, D.C. on Monday with 73 Forward. WRN is a proud partner with the National Council of Jewish Women, and we are grateful for their leadership and for all of those, especially among our community here, who have fought for our rights for decades, and we're very sorry we have to continue to fight. And with that, we take a deep breath and we plunge ahead to something much more lifting, much more hopeful, as we pass it to Rabbi Bressler and Paving the Path Ahead, Creativity and Innovation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Zamor, and thank you all of you for being with us this evening. It's so wonderful to be with all of you, or evening, or whatever time zone you are joining us from. I also want to say I'm so grateful to our colleague, Rabbi Jen Gubitz, who helped plan this evening with us but couldn't join us tonight. I'm so honored to be with you today to introduce you to our 4 amazing panelists, Rabbi Dr. Laurie Coskey, Maharat Ruth Friedman, Rabbi Sara Luria, and Rabbi Rebecca Camel. Since you all have access to their bios, which will be shared in the chat with you in a moment, and we have so much to learn from each of them, I'm going to invite our panelists to do the true introduction to each of them as they answer their first question. So thank you again for making the space in your day to spend what I hope will be a very powerful hour learning from 4 incredible women. Each of these women have forged unique pathways of innovation in their rabbinates. So what is the why of innovation? Some rabbis innovate because doors were closed to them and they had to create their own pathways. Other rabbis innovate because the way they thought their life would turn out shifted. Still others rabbis innovate because they have a vision for new possibilities and opportunities for engagement. while others innovate because of personal or professional ruptures that drive them to pursue holiness and wholeness in new ways. Some rabbis innovate within existing institutional structures, such as congregations, hillels, day schools, or federations, while others innovate outside of these structures and create brand new pathways. Tonight, we are so excited to bring you these colleagues who are doing their own versions of innovative work in 4 very unique ways. So in just a moment, I'm going to offer some questions and invite each of our 4 panelists to offer their answers. We will also have an opportunity for question and answer at the end of this moderated discussion. So I invite you to type your questions in the chat box, and I will be looking at them throughout the session, and we'll ask them as some questions to our panelists at the end of this about half an hour of moderated discussion. So I now invite each of you, our panelists, to share a brief introduction about yourself as you are also answering the question, how did you design your unique rabbinate? What were the opportunities, challenges, and who were the people who supported you? And who maybe were some of those folks, without naming names, who were maybe not quite as supportive as you pursued this path? So you all know the order. We're going to start with Maharat Friedman, then Rabbi Luria, then Rabbi Coskey, and then Rabbi Camel.
Myself. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's really a delight to be here. So I was in the graduating class of Yeshivat Maharat, the first graduating class in 2013, which is a program designed to ordain Orthodox women as, originally we said spiritual leaders, though I think the vast majority of us at this point would refer to ourselves as rabbis. I think the program's changed a lot in the past 10 years or so, and Feminism has changed a lot in the past 10 years. And so, you know, I was thinking about like, am I the right person to be on a panel about innovation? Because on the one hand, that's like a radically new idea to have Orthodox women serving as spiritual leadership in synagogues and in the community. On the other hand, the only thing that actually makes that unique is the fact that I'm a woman, right? And I work in a synagogue, like it's plenty of rabbis do that. And so I think that in some ways the job was already outlined. You know, I didn't have to found my own organization. But on the other hand, especially because I was in the first graduating class, it really was new territory. And I think that because the community didn't quite yet know what was a Maharat, how was a Maharat going to be different than a male rabbi, what does all of this mean? Like, what are we signing up for? I don't think anyone totally knew. I did have some flexibility in crafting my own path forward. I think, and I've been able to sort of, I think, tweak parts of the position in order to make them a little bit different. So it's kind of a funny dance like that. And I think that, you know, as the school has grown, more of the positions have become more commonplace, certainly within the community. And I think that certainly I'm not the only one who is struggling to just navigate all of these waters and figure out exactly like, what does it mean for a woman to be serving in an Orthodox synagogue? How does that role look different than a man's? And I think certainly the most important principle guiding that is the lack of egalitarianism. So I'm happy to share more about that, but that's what I would just say as an intro.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Luria. Luria, we'll invite you to share next.
Hi, everyone. It's beautiful to be here with all of you. I know Maharat Ruth from, I don't know, New York a decade ago, so it's fun to see her pop up on my screen. So you were saying, Julie, that we weren't going to name names, but I'm going to name names in the positive. So I was ordained about a decade ago, but about 20 years ago, I lived in the Bay Area, and I knew that I wanted to go to rabbinical school, but and I always knew I was a rabble rouser who couldn't stay within the lines. So those two things were true. I wanted to go to rabbinical school, and I could never do it the way everyone else did it. So I met this incredible educator in the Bay Area named Rachel Brody. And I just took to her, and she said, why don't you come be my intern at this Jewish organization that I am trying to get off the ground called The Ritualist, which then became Jewish Milestones. It was the same organization, just had a different name because apparently The Ritualist sounded too pagan. And so, of course, I was drawn to it because I was like, yeah, like, let's do something crazy. So anyway, so Rachel said to me she was designing Creative Ritual and helping the people in her community who were not affiliated access Ritual. She would kill me for saying unaffiliated because she always felt like it was not the way to say it. It was like the people who affiliate differently than you do. So anyway, so Rachel said, Sara, you know what ritual you should try before your wedding? And I said, Rachel, tell me what? And she said, you should go to the mikvah. And I said, mikvah? Like I'm a Reform kid. Like I grew up Reform. I went to Union Temple in Grand Army Plaza, Brooklyn, with Rabbi Linda Henry Goodman. Like nobody was, mikvah was not on the tip of my tongue. And Rachel said, go to mikvah before your wedding. So I went to a community mikvah in Boston called Mayim Chaim before my wedding. And it changed the trajectory of my life. And I've then founded a mikvah organization in New York City and have done kind of rabble-rousing out of the box things in my rabbinate ever since. So when we were preparing for this call and I was told, think about how you've designed your rabbinate, I was thinking about who has helped me find the next most elegant step in my rabbinate is really the way I think about it, is like this certainly wasn't designed. If anyone is designing it's the Shekhinah. But I am trying to say yes to what feels right and good, and especially trusting my elders and the people who came before me. And I just, Rachel Brody passed away a month ago. And so I am trying to tell the story everywhere I can because so her memory lives on.
Amen. We definitely continue to think of her beautiful memory and lift it up in all of the many people, yourself included, who have benefited from her incredible work. Thank you so much. Rabbi Coskey.
Hello, I'm Laurie Coskey, and I'm so delighted to see all of you and be here tonight. I especially am happy to see, I see at least two of my classmates. We were ordained in 1985. I see Barbara Goldman-Mortel and Ellen Greenspan, and a special hello and hug and kisses to you. You may be able to hear it in my voice, though you don't know me. I caught the crud from my grandchildren last week, and so if I'm sniffing and coughing, I'm going to try not to, but I hope that you will forgive me a bit. I live in San Diego, California. I came here right after ordination, and I served a big place for 8 years and left under unpleasant circumstances. All of a sudden, I found myself with money and without a job. The money was good because I said, what do rabbis do if they can? What do rabbis do when they don't know what else to do? We study, right? So I went right to the university. They weren't giving very many general kinds of doctorates here in San Diego. We're a really science-focused place, and I knew I wasn't going to be science-focused, and I enrolled in a doctorate in leadership studies. I was raising two very young children with a ex-husband who also lived in San Diego, and I knew that I was going to have to continue to make my life, and I would not be like traditional rabbis who could schlep a family from place to place because I wasn't going to be able to move, having divorced the father, or being divorced from the father, a wonderful father of my two great sons who are now happy adults in their own lives. And so I went to school, and I loved school, just like I loved HUC, and I loved school, my undergraduate education. I loved it all along the way. And I learned a lot about San Diego and the place where I was. And I learned a lot about systemic change. I'd always been a person who focused on Tikkun Olam at HUC Cincinnati. I started both food programs and clothing programs. But in my doctorate, I really learned that we needed to change systems, not just to participate in helping people with the support they needed right now. We needed to help people not be not be so encumbered by so many troubles. And so I adopted a mantra of mine. I became very involved in the community. And my mantra was attributed to the Reverend Martin Luther King, although it's not his, it belongs to a Unitarian Universalist. And Martin Luther King sort of summarized it in the best possible way. It's the road, the arc of the moral universe. I have it. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. You all have heard that, I'm sure. And then I always add to it in every setting, we are bending it. And that's been sort of my charge in San Diego. And what was so interesting to me when I finished my doctorate is I became very involved in a nascent but really exciting labor faith movement that was growing all over the country. And I led that here with a very large interfaith table for 18 or 19 years. And we became very involved in the public arena, in policy making, and in immigration reform. San Diego is the belly of the beast for immigration, just like all the southern border is. And so we became very involved in things that mattered a lot to our communities and mattered a lot to the people who are elected to support communities through elected office. And so I became kind of a person of influence in San Diego because I pursued my passion for learning and my love of community.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. I love the continuation of the phrase to say, and we are bending it, that we are active participants. Amazing.
We are bending it.
We are bending it. Great. Thank you so much. Rabbi Camel.
Okay. Hi, everyone. It is really a huge honor to be a part of this panel with these incredible women who are creative and interesting and inspirational. So I'm really excited to just hear your stories and not even talk about myself. But I am Rebecca Camel. I was ordained from HUC in 2016. And my story starts, I think, really when I was a child. And I didn't have the language for what I'm doing now when I was a young person. But when I was growing up, I had a sister who was diagnosed with a genetic disorder that ended her life when she was 3 and I was 7. And during her life and after her death, I was incredibly supported by my rabbis. But I didn't see them on the bima leading services or teaching Sunday school or leading us in prayer. I saw them in my living room holding my parents' hands as they prayed. I saw them crying with us. I saw them rocking my sister in the rocking chair in her room. I saw them sitting with me in their offices processing her death. And so that sort of softer, more intimate side of the rabbinate was something that I really was exposed to from a very young age. And it stayed with me. And when I entered rabbinical school, I had 2 student congregations, student pulpits that I flew to or drove to a couple of times a month. And I realized quickly that the congregational rabbinate wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do, that I didn't find as much joy or meaning in leading services and doing Torah study and teaching Sunday school. But what I loved was being able to go to the hospital or go to the nursing home and sit with a congregant and hear their story and help them navigate their pain or their crisis or whatever it was that they were going through and lift that up for them. So then the summer after my 3rd year of school, I had the opportunity to do CPE, which is clinical pastoral education, and it's the training program to become a chaplain. And I remember sitting in the office of my incredible advisor and mentor, Rabbi Julie Schwartz, and saying to her, well, I don't really want to be in a congregation, so this better work because I don't know what I'm going to do otherwise. And she said, just wait, just see. So after my first week or 2, it was clear that this was the path that I wanted to take, that being with people in time of deep pain or sorrow, helping people navigate challenges and crisis, being that non-anxious presence in a time of really great tumult or chaos or uncertainty with people brings me incredible meaning. And I think from those first early moments of watching rabbis in my life sit with my family and be with us in a time of really incredible pain and sadness, I realized that I wanted to do that too. I wanted to be there for people in that way. And so now I work as a chaplain at a hospital here in Minneapolis, where I live. And I am in two intensive care units, medical ICU, and then a cardiac ICU. And I also have a general cardiac floor that I respond to and care for patients on. And this is the most fulfilling career I could have asked for. And I don't think I'd ever want to do anything else. So I'm on the path for me, definitely.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rabbi Camel, for sharing. And what a powerful way for rabbis to have showed up in your life and in your family's life. So I want to, you shared these beautiful ways of how you got to where you are. And I'm curious because we all admit that getting to the places where we are, it's not always a smooth road. So I'm curious if any of you, and we can maybe just let people unmute and jump in, of what were some of those challenges in reaching this moment, and potentially how did you, for yourself, push through some of those, either those doubters or those challenges as you decided that this was, as Rabbi Camel said so beautifully, this is the true path for you?
I'm happy to start because I went first last time, so I've had a little bit of a break. So also, I neglected to mention that I work at a synagogue in Washington, D.C., where I've lived for 9 years. So much of the opposition to, well, basically all of the opposition to my program was grounded solely in the fact that we were all women and not men. And I would say that certainly I found it easy, well, not easy, but I guess I viewed it almost as a challenge to power through that, to recognize that I could understand why some people felt threatened by changes. Orthodoxy by definition doesn't really like big changes. And so I always understood that, but at the same time, of course, wasn't going to cave to that. And so I found it, the really initially a lot of the narrative in Maharat was, you have to be better than all the men, right? Like, we have to prove that we can do it. You have to know more, you have to just in every possible way. And I think that, of course, again, this is like in the past 10 to 12 years, we realized, and I realized for myself, no, I don't, I happen to think I'm pretty good at what I do, but I don't have to prove myself. I don't have to know more than everyone else. And if anyone wants to take issue with that, they can look at the fact that the Orthodox day school system, which I attended for high school, doesn't educate often girls and boys equally. And that's really Orthodoxy's problem, not my problem. And I shouldn't have to bear all the weight of correcting those errors on my own. And I think that ability to own it, and grow in my knowledge, I think certainly, actually conveys a kind of a confidence that people, I think, respect. And so it's been, I think, a journey externally for the community to figure out what to do with us, but I think also internally for us, which I referenced a little bit earlier, figuring out, what does it mean for us? Do we have to prove ourselves, or do we just own who we are and work for, people who want us to be there?
That's wonderful, right? And just to elevate what Rabbi Zamor shared in the chat, that I think that idea is so similar for those who were the first in whatever their movement was, of you have to be the best, because if you mess up, it must represent everyone. But how powerfully you said that it's not that, it's that we get to just be ourselves. And that's really a way to show progress. Amazing. If anyone else wants to jump in.
Sure, I can share. I feel like so many things have, it's just been, it's hard every day is what I would say. But what the two things I want to share for us are, I'm in this little clergy think tank at or a little clergy task force at a think tank, thinking about how do you change culture. And that involves both systems change and internal change. So external change and internal change. And one of the things that I thought was so beautiful that I learned that being in this task force is that one of the 4 principles that they have discerned from research that gets in the way of people making changes is not giving ourselves permission. So that self-permission is actually one of the biggest barriers to change, or not giving ourselves permission. And I thought about that with myself, just like, and my people, the people I serve, just like being able to say, I can't, this is my tradition, and I'm allowed to play and extend and wonder and push and I really feel like that took a lot because it's very easy to just, see what everyone else is doing and go along and do what everyone else is doing. And it's much harder to give yourself permission to try to do things differently. And the second thing, and this is more external, or maybe this is internal and external, is that as a woman, I think most girls are socialized to take care of things themselves. I don't know what the best way to say that is, but be able to do everything. I always tell the brides I work with, like, you're supposed to lose weight for the wedding and be perfect, and all of it, and the tables are supposed to look perfect, and then the place cards are supposed to look perfect, and you're supposed to look perfect, but it's supposed to look effortless. Like you didn't try to make it all look so perfect, and you don't know how this dress fits you like a glove. Like, and just like, and I think that's just part of our culture. I see it with almost every straight couple whose wedding I do, is that the bride has been socialized this way, and the husband is just like, oh, honey, I'll support you. But she doesn't know how to ask for help. So I'm saying she, but really I mean me, right? So I've been socialized my whole life up until, I was probably like 33 to be able to do everything myself. Like I had 2 kids in rabbinical school, and I could get through it, and I could do it, and I could, get straight A's in college, whatever it is. And then I started an organization, and I didn't have the money to do it myself, right? Like I actually needed to ask people for money, or else I couldn't run the organization. And for me, that was a real moment of vulnerability, to be like, I need help. And it took so much work to get to the place of saying, I can't do this by myself. Is that okay? Are people going to think I'm a failure if I can't do it by myself? And just the vulnerability of just saying, can we? And having to learn that lesson, I feel like the hard way, although maybe we all learn it the hard way, was transformative in my work, but it was like breaking down walls and walls of training about how I was supposed to be.
Amen to all of that.
I can take a little jump at it since we're staying in our order. I had lots of interesting challenges just with the charting a new territory. What a beautiful child. Mwah, right? We just want to do that. But I had really interesting challenges because I came into the public arena and I thought, oh, what's it going to be to have a rabbi who's running this really big interfaith table, who built a big interfaith table. And what we found was people were so grateful to have Jews being active in the public arena. I know Jonah Pesner began some of that work with the Reform movement about 15 years or a decade after we started that. And to have people, especially ordained rabbis, being involved in some of the most critical issues of our day, which are not at all secular issues, but affected much less the Jewish community. Issues of poverty, extreme poverty, issues of anti-immigrant or racism or whatever were all these secular issues that pile into an arena that recently, until anti-Semitism, at least where we are, is really sort of rearing its ugly head in very sad ways here also, as well as everybody else. But we were living in a time that was sort of free from being under that kind of watch or that kind of attack. And so the public was very grateful to see Jews stepping out. And I had the privilege of running this organization where there were Jews and Christians and Catholics and Muslims and Unitarian Universalists and all flavor of Protestants. And what for me became my real challenge was to be super respectful of sort of the Jesus consciousness, like super respectful of that. I'd been raised Jewish, Jesus and all of that, Christmas, none of it was a part of my life growing up. And it was always an anathema to me. And to sort of bring that into my life, not in terms of being an interfaith family or as a rabbi working with interfaith families, but in terms of working with theologians. Everybody I worked with was ordained in some way, except the Muslim women, and they were professors. So they were all sort of theologians in their own rights. And to learn that the African-American pastors actually felt sadness for me that I didn't embrace their passion for Jesus. It took me a while to kind of absorb that and understand that in those feelings is a lot of love and care about who I am as a person. And I didn't have to be afraid of that. I didn't have to be so challenged by that. I didn't have to say even to myself how wrong that was. I opened up in my own heart sort of an embrace for the possibility of truth in those areas. And I found that really challenging in a multi-faith endeavor. And as far as being a woman went in that endeavor, it was super helpful because we worked often with employers who were exploiting people who worked for them, janitors, housekeepers, food service workers, things like that. And it was better for me to be able to come in and ask to have a meeting with them. And when, of course, they didn't want to meet with me or my clergy board, or I was able to say in the nicest of ways, it's okay if you don't want to meet with me because we'll just come back tomorrow with 50 of us and then and all the local TV stations. So you don't have to have a meeting with us. It'll just get a little more complicated if you don't want to meet. And I think it was very hard for men to say that and be credible. Like there's something that we have as a woman where we can still be really soft and give a real pow with what we're doing and how we're doing it. And so I think that had been really successful. That really helped us be successful in gaining the public trust.
Amazing. I love that. We'll just bring some TV stations. No big deal.
No big deal.
No big deal. Rabbi Camel, if you want to jump in. And then we're going to spotlight everybody so we can just keep this conversation going.
Yeah. So I would say I had a couple of challenges along the path. One was when I was in rabbinical school, the sort of gold standard of being a rabbi that was, I think, espoused to students was be a senior rabbi of a large congregation. That's the goal. And if you can't do that, then there's something wrong with you. And so when I wanted to be a chaplain and sort of realized that was the path I wanted to take, I did meet some resistance from administrators and professors who just really didn't understand what I was doing or why. I met my husband in rabbinical school, and he decided to pursue the congregational rabbinate for a while. He's not doing that now, but he was. And so some people sort of said, oh, well, you must be going to chaplaincy because he's going to a congregation. And so you can't both be in a congregation. So is that why you're not having a congregation? And it was really frustrating to sort of have that comparison made all the time. And then I would say a second challenge was the additional training that's required to be a chaplain. So once I finished, I did two units or two sections of this clinical pastoral education while I was in school. And then when I was done with rabbinical school, I did another year of training. And then after that, I did, to be board certified as a chaplain, you do another 2,000 hours of clinical experience, and then you write a lot of essays about why you're competent and why you've met all of these standards and competencies that the chaplain organizations want you to meet. And you go before a board and explain why you can be a chaplain and why you are competent in this work. And then they say yes or no, and you become board certified. So I did all of that. And that was a lot of work after 5 years of rabbinical school. I was tired. And I really, after 5 years, was like, I don't know if I really want to do more of this. But I realized that this was the path I wanted to take. And if that's what it took to get there, then I would do it. And I had some really amazing mentors along the way. And then the third challenge, I think, was as a rabbi, serving in populations that were primarily not Jewish. And I think Rabbi Laurie Coskey spoke to that a little bit. But, you know, it was sort of this weird dynamic of how am I a rabbi while I'm serving someone while I'm caring for someone or serving someone who's Catholic or Muslim or Protestant or whatever. And it took me a while to figure out kind of how to navigate that. And so I certainly have had instances of anti-Semitism from patients, from colleagues. I once had a patient who I walked in the room and he didn't know I was a rabbi, but he had a big swastika tattooed on his chest. And I was like, well, it's going to be an interesting visit. We'll see how this goes. And so I've experienced that just because I'm out in the community and I'm working with people who are of all faiths, no faith, and it can come up sometimes. But for the most part, certainly where I am now, I feel incredibly supported, and we have a really diverse patient population. So it hasn't been a problem where I am now, but in the past, it certainly has. So those are some of the challenges.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing them. And so now we're actually going to spotlight everybody so that we can all be kind of on one screen together. So that's why it's popping up for you panelists. Just ask one more question and then we're going to move into kind of a collective thought activity to say what is kind of something you appreciate the most about your rabbinate today and what inspires you to keep pursuing that path or another innovative path? What are the things that, really keep you moving forward in this, as has been mentioned, really challenging time to exist in our world? And anyone can jump in. You can mess with the order.
I think what keeps me going is knowing that I am making an impact and having these really important moments with people who are experiencing pain or discomfort or uncertainty. And that every day I get to go to work and really am there for people with my whole self, and can give people space to process and share and express themselves within the context of a place that often doesn't allow for that, right? And so many people, when they come to the hospital, especially, become a diagnosis, become, patient X in bed A. And so for me to come in and say, I'm here for you as you, who you are as a person, as a human being in this world. Tell me about you. Give me your story. And so the fact that I get to do that and give people that space is really powerful. And I also really love, despite being someone who really likes control and doesn't really love uncertainty in outside of my work, I actually really love the variety and not always knowing what I'm going to walk into. I think sometimes that can be kind of exciting, but outside of work, none of that. So it has to stay in the hospital. But yeah, I would say those are some of the things that really keep me going.
I'm happy
I love what you just said, Rebecca. Who's talking? Is that Ruth?
It's Ruth, but totally
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay. So I was going to say, I feel like I have like two spheres of answers to that question. One is internal and one is external. I guess I would say more externally, like I mean, it's so ridiculous. I feel ridiculous even saying it, but I think the Torah, and it's just like the most brilliant book in the world. And I have a Parsha podcast called Life Imitates Torah instead of Life Imitates Art, because it's really true to me. Like, I think that no matter how many times you read any given Parsha, I used to think, oh, I have to file this drasha away for next year. But no, like, because there's always shedding light on whatever's going on in our world. And I love being able to like help situate current events and struggles in life within a Jewish context. I think it's something that is very meaningful, and that people find meaning in, and really a way to connect to religion that way, and to their Jewish text more authentically. I would say totally internally, if anyone wants to know what happens in my head. I turned 37 a few weeks ago, and I feel like I'm 9 years into my role in the synagogue, and I've gone from like, I came in as sort of this like 2-year fellow, we're not sure what to do with you, but we'll give you a job for 2 years and then we'll like move on, and I'm currently the sole interim clergy. Actually, it's a long story I really don't want to go into, but let's just say the sole clergy at the synagogue right now, which isn't really something that's happened for Orthodox women yet. And I think that, what has gotten me to that point is a lot of extremely hard work, but also I feel like I'm finally kind of confident in myself, and my skills, my ability to do the job. I was talking with a couple of male Orthodox rabbi colleagues a few weeks ago, and they're both like late 30s, early 40s, and they're like, yeah, my confidence it's just cratering all the time. Like I wonder, do I know how to do my job? Am I doing this? Did I answer that question right? And I said, that's so weird, because I'm finally at the point where I'm not constantly second guessing if I messed up everything. And one of them said, maybe it's because my mom always told me I was just going to be like so amazing. And I was like, yeah, women don't get that message, like no one going into a new field gets the message of like, you're awesome and you're going to be awesome. We're all like, we don't know if we can do this and we're going to have to fight for our acceptance and recognition. And so it took a really long time to get there, but I feel like I kind of have. And it's that the fact that I'm not, sometimes I definitely do, but not constantly like looking over my shoulder like, oh no, did I just mess that up? That I think also like helps me feel like, yeah, maybe I can actually do this.
Amen. I will say just amen to that,
Wow.
right? Gaining it as we go. I love that. All right, go for it, Laurie.
Wow. I probably did tell my 2 sons that they were amazing and they would be amazing when they grew up. And I hope if I'd been blessed with daughters, which I so wanted a daughter, I would have told her the same things. My mother thinks I ruined them though, because she never would have told any of her daughters they were amazing. Maybe still not. She does now. I think she learned. She does now. So what I really have appreciated over the years is the credibility that we as rabbis, but also just clergy, bring to the dynamics of a situation. When we come, Rebecca, I was so touched by what you said, and I love all of that too, the face-to-face, the panim el panim relationships that we can create even just for a few moments, but that where we're really present. And I think that we as rabbis have such, our title gives to us the assumption that we are moral, that we are good listeners, that we care, that we want to serve the world. Like the title has been such a beautiful title for me. And I guess, from time to time we disappoint people royally in who we are. But for the most part, I think that our colleagues, that is what we wanted to do when we took on this title. And I remember really clearly that we were trying to pass a living wage ordinance in the early 2000s in the city of San Diego. And we came every week to make public comment to the city council. We brought them like a homemade pie so workers could get a piece of the pie. I mean, we did all sorts of things, but we found out that our mayor had a favorite biblical phrase, and it was, let justice roll down like waters, right out of Amos. So every single week at the end of our public comment, we would use that phrase to the mayor. We'd look at him and use that phrase to him saying, this is justice rolling down, right? And when he, of course we passed, it took 3 years, but we passed it. But when he left as mayor, he wrote a book, and one of his chapters is called Let Justice Roll Down. So it is that phrase. And we really sort of put that into the public vernacular. The other thing we put in for credibility is you all, I'm sure, hear the phrase moral budget. But that wasn't always a phrase, a moral budget. It was a phrase that people of faith, religious leaders throughout the country really put into the vernacular to talk about like how we treat people in the world. And because we had that credibility, people expect us to talk about moral budgets. They expect us to care about those who have been left behind. They expect us to lift up the voices of very real people who have been forgotten. And so to be able to have permission to do those things that we enter the rabbinate for has been just glorious.
I would say that from my vantage point, we're living in between times. We're living kind of like on the edge of the 20th to 21st century. And we're living in this crisis time. And we don't know what how the secular world is going to emerge out of this. We don't know how the environment will emerge out of this. We don't know how religious life in America is going to emerge out of this. Like, we just don't know how we're going to be organized as Jews or as Christians, or, in 2050, let's say, or even 2035, like, we just don't know what the structures are going to be. And I am sure that people who are older than me will say, well, maybe it's always felt like we were living in between times, and maybe it always felt like we were on the edge of the knife. And I think this is really one of those times. And so I get to be a rabbi in one of those times. Like, I get to be a spiritual leader for people who are on the edge of the knife all the time, in all the various ways. With, last year it was with, children at home and work women working and their kids on top of them, as you just saw with me. My husband's at work right now. So I was holding down the fort. That's just one tiny little moment of crisis that our time has begot, and so I feel like it's a real blessing to have this job, to be a person who is able to have a microphone, and a microphone for good. Like my mentor says, use power to equalize power. And I feel like I get to have a job that does that, where I get to have the power vested in me by the name Rabbi to help other people feel more powerful in their lives in all different kinds of ways. So it just feels like a really important job every morning when I wake up.
That's amazing. And what a beautiful way, right, to close this part of our time together, this beautiful sharing. I'll encourage people to continue to type in. We'll have time for a couple of questions near the end. But since we have your four brilliant, amazing, thoughtful minds together, we just want you to casually save Judaism and the rabbinate. In that, I'd love you four to just chat with one another, with all of us getting to witness this, of what does a forward-looking rabbinate look like? What does a feminist, egalitarian, inclusive, innovative, equitable rabbinate really look like? We are hearing from so many that so much of this work is so wonderful and meaningful. But right, it also can be really challenging. And so how do we create that, that rabbinate that does inspire people to continue to pursue these amazing paths that all of you are starting? So I'm going to, in the spirit of innovation, use a not new, but exciting technology called a Jamboard that will capture their ideas as I share them publicly with all of you. So for us visual learners in the room, that we can see these ideas as they share with one another. So I'm going to share my screen. And I invite the four of you to chat with one another and share ideas, and I'll share them on the screen.
I can start because I haven't started yet, and I think about this, every day. So, the second organization that I founded was called Beloved Brooklyn, and it was a home-based Jewish community. So my husband and I and my family, we moved to a big house in Brooklyn, and we created community out of our house. It was like a mashup between like a Chabad, except I'm the rabbi, and a JCC, except it's not like public space, and a synagogue, except we didn't do prayer all the time, like et cetera, et cetera. It was like it was a beautiful mashup. And one of my mentors, feminist, like she's an icon to me. She said, who's you know, in her late 60s, said to me, you're bringing your rabbinate back into the kitchen, like we fought to get you out of the kitchen, and now you're bringing your rabbinate back into the kitchen. And I was like, no, I'm bringing, I mean, yes, but in the best way. Like I'm bringing, so I can be home all the time and I can be at work all the time. Now I know not everyone wants that. But for me, it felt like this reclamation of this like feminist or this anti-feminist trope that's like a woman's place is in the home. And I was like, yeah, but I'm going to be running my rabbinate out of it. Like I'm going to be hosting my community out of it. And to me, I wouldn't say it was sustainable, although if I could start it again 5 years later, I would have different ways to be sustainable. But I would say that it was feminist, it was innovative, and it was much more equitable for me it was easier for me because I got to be home with my kids and be with my community. And that was really a special like chapter of our lives. And so I just want to hold that up as it's not for everyone. Like it's just definitely not for everyone. But for me, it was a really powerful way to get back into the kitchen, even though I don't like cooking. My husband's the cook in our family, but to get back into the kitchen, but in the most transformative way.
I'll take a turn right back into the public. God, Sara, that is so inspiring. I want to be in your Brooklyn house. I'm very far away, but I really would like to be there. I would like to see more women who are rabbis running for public office. And to really run for public office, you have to plan it pretty early. You have to get involved in like little town councils or certain things and take certain steps and get to school boards and get sort of active here and there. You have to make sure you have the right kind of stocks in your retirement portfolio so that you don't get dinged later on. I mean, there's lots of things that you have to do to run for public office, but I think that sort of women as rabbis in the public arena, I think there would be no stopping the public good and the public benefit that would happen for any city anywhere. And it would also be really interesting. From time to time, men have run and won elections and some of them haven't, but it's been, I think it would be really an important thing for us to see a percentage of us going toward public office, elected office. And we could help our sisters win, which would be, there's a built-in sisterhood for helping them win.
I can jump in. I think mine, it's funny because in some ways mine is like more specific to men than to women in a way, but I think that, I consider myself part of like the open Orthodox community, right? An Orthodox community, but one that exists in a progressive city, and within the realm of Orthodoxy is a progressive flavor of Orthodoxy. And just like as a little example right now, we've had some transitions in my community in the past number of months, and getting a daily minyan, which for us consists of 10 men, has a few people, really men, said like, well, we're an Orthodox synagogue, we have to have one, right? Whether it's COVID or whatever, back to the office, we have to have one. And it's been a struggle to get 10 men who are, able to show up at 8 a.m. And we don't have a lot of retirees who have that kind of time. And certainly in the evenings also. And one of my frustrations, I think, or at least where I've like tried to help identify the struggles, is I think that Orthodox men in progressive communities are really trying to strike this like really difficult, if not impossible, balance of how you be a good Jew in a non-egalitarian system, and also how you be a good employee and a good dad and a good partner and all of those things. And frankly, I think it's sort of impossible. And I was just like speaking on the phone last night with one of the men who's really been trying as hard as he can. I get some people from Indian come like with their AirPods in, they're at work meetings, but they're really like trying to be there to help. And he has 4 kids. And I said, it's impossible to be a good Jewish man and like a good dad, right? Like, you know that. And he sort of was saying for the first time, like, I think kind of really realizing how impossible this is. And I think that like all which is to say that I think that when I sort of see my role within my community in some ways is that I come from the outside and that I'm not a male Orthodox rabbi. But I think that like, then, you know, you can see people always said, oh, well, so you'll be the rabbi for the women. I'm like, no, that's not it's really not my interest. Like, I don't do women's programming. I'm not good at it. It's not my interest. But I think that just being an outsider just enough to be able to look at things that, you know, I think a lot of these people take for granted. Well, it's my job to be a minion. I have to be there and be able to say, well, look at what you're trying to like accomplish. You're trying to balance impossible things. And so, you know, I think that's kind of ironically sort of what I can bring to the community is a bit of that outsider perspective.
Yeah, I love all of the things that have already been said, and I would echo them. I think COVID has taught us that Judaism doesn't have to be confined to the walls of a synagogue. And I think we knew that before, but I think that COVID has really shown that in a profound way. And so I would love to see more of that. I would love to see Judaism in our homes, like what Sara was doing, or out in the streets and, you know, raising awareness for social justice causes, like what Laurie does. And I think that we need more of that. I also think that we need more emphasis on people who are not able to physically come to the synagogue. And when I was in rabbinical school, it was something that I was really passionate about, specifically the elderly and people who are in nursing homes or assisted livings who are outside of the synagogue and can't physically get to a building, and how we can support these people. And it's not just the elderly, it's people that are homebound because of illness, or people who, because of this global pandemic, don't want to come to synagogue, right? So how can we reach them in a meaningful way? Even as restrictions are easing and things are opening back up, there are still people that don't want to be in person. And so how can we make sure that we are really engaging people who can't be there in person or don't want to be? So I would say those are my answers, along with everything everyone else said.
Amazing. Does anybody want to jump in? Anything more? This is a beautiful, intentionally very colorful set of ideas. Yeah, go for it, Laurie.
I just want to add one more thing, and that is, you know, what do they say? There's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women, right? And I think that especially as we move further in our careers, it's really an obligation to help and support people who are looking for new ways to be a connector. Each of us can be a connector for others, one another, or in our communities, for other women, to help other women, more than just mentor, but to help other women take steps that they want into whatever will be their innovative, their innovative rabbi life. And some of that, I just wanted to point one more thing out. I know Suzanne Singer was with us. I don't know if she still is today, but Suzanne Singer did so much rabbiing in the public arena while she also serves a congregation. And she's been such a good role model and leader for so many of us on the West Coast in the Reform movement.
I wanted to also add that I don't know how many people here are senior rabbis, so just FYI, I'm going to be talking about senior rabbis. I was ordained kind of on the cusp of 2012, 2013. So some of my fellow, some of my colleagues are seniors. Most of us don't want to be senior rabbis because it's not sustainable for men. It's not sustainable for women. It's not sustainable for trans people. It's very, very all consuming. And I wonder if a feminist, sustainable, innovative, equitable rabbinate for all doesn't involve shifting that whole paradigm. Because I mean, one of you, mentioned the men who want to be you said, Ruth, like, men, it's hard to be a dad, a good dad and a good Jew, it's hard to be, so how do we create a rabbinate that allow, so many people have said to me like, oh, you get to be home with your family on Friday night. I'm like, how is this like the gold? I snuck this way that I can found small organizations so I get to be home with my family on Shabbat. Yeah. Like this shouldn't be like a secret methodology that Rabbi Sara Luria created. It should be like something that we aspire to be able to offer, not every Friday night, not every Saturday morning. So I would just say, and I don't mean to like scapegoat senior rabbis, like that's not really what it is. It's a whole system of, and I'm sure the WRN talks about this, right? But just like, how do we create a rabbinate that people are really excited to stay in and not just to, graduate rabbinical school, get into, and then quickly say, oh my God, this is like so overwhelming and too hard and unsustainable.
Absolutely. I think so much of it is figuring out how do we create an entire Jewish community that supports its leaders, and so that we can all really be in this together to see that we're actually one another's best partners in working together on this. Amazing. I am noticing the time, so I'm going to stop sharing this screen, but we can maybe post this with the recording so that folks can see it. And just as we are heading out, I think we answered most of the questions that came through in the chat and came through to me. I'd love each of you to just give a sentence of what's your hope for the future, for yourself or for the female rabbinate in general. And I'll just go in the order you are in my screen. We'll start with, we'll do Rabbi Camel, then Maharat, Friedman, then Rabbi Coskey, then Rabbi Luria, because that's the order you're on my screen.
I would say my hope is for more women and for women who are interested in being creative and innovative like we are, and who want to change Judaism for the better. So more of us, I would say. Yeah.
It's such an interesting question. I guess going back, I liked also Rabbi Luria's point. This is something I've also been thinking about a lot, that the classic model of the rabbinate isn't sustainable for anyone of any gender. And I think that, if we can just try to help continue to push the way that we think about like what the role of spiritual leadership is, what the role of the rabbi is, and like what it means for that to be maybe a more balanced and healthy position, and also like the way that then models healthy behavior for congregants, I think is something that's really important. And yes, I live in DC where everyone is an insane workaholic. So yeah.
It's a really good question, Julie. I think that I would hope to see sort of far off into the future is that anybody who chooses to go into the rabbinate knows that the choice they're making will be an open-ended choice for their life, that they will have, for all sorts of reasons and all sorts of pathways that we take and turns that we take and don't take in our lives, that they will end up far down the line with a career that they felt was generative and meaningful, and where they were able to be of service to others and have fulfillment for themselves.
Yeah, I want to echo that. I think there's one of my theologies is that we were each put on this earth for with these specific skills and these specific talents and these specific hopes and dreams and fears and all of it to do some work that only we can do. To do some tasks. I wouldn't even say work like working, but like take on roles and do the tasks that only we can do. And I think up until now, the rabbinate, I would say in this phase of life, like the late 20th century, early 21st century, the rabbinate has found itself constrained, and that we are doing jobs that other people wrote for us. A lot of us are doing jobs that other people wrote for us. And so my hope would be that we would be able to share our vision and our dreams and our hopes and our special skills and our special talents in the roles that we can have in the rabbinate, and not have to fit into another person's idea of what a rabbi should be.
Amen. Amen to all of those beautiful wishes for the future. And absolutely right that we can all write our own narratives, and that all of us on the screen, whatever role we play in the Jewish community, that we can all be partners in writing that next chapter. So to close, we're actually going to end with a blessing, just a blessing of gratitude for creativity. And we all can join in on it together. You'll see it on your screen. And I invite you to join along with me if you wish. And of course, you can say amen at the end of the blessing, because that is as if you said it all together. So let's join together. Baruch atah Adonai makor hachayim shebara otanu betzalmo uzmanmin otanu lechadesh bechol yom tamid maaseh v'reshit. Baruch atah Adonai yotzer yitzirim. Amen. Blessed are you, source of life, who created us in your image and invites us to renew daily, perpetually the work of your creation. Blessed are you, Adonai, who created us creative. Amen to that. Thank you again to our panelists. Thank you all for being here. And I want to turn it back to Rabbi Klafter for some quick announcements and closing.
I'm unmuted. Thank you. Thank you. Julie, thank you so much. And Jen Gubitz, you were wonderful partners in planning this. And to our panelists, I'm Beth Klafter, one of the co-presidents, along with Emily Siegel, who's on the call now. And I know she joins me in thanking you. I also just want to thank our live captioner, Corey, and our tech Zoom leader, Dave, in the background, and Rachel Behrman, a member of our board, who has been our chat queen over here, if that's okay to say, sorry. I want to also be sure everybody knows all the other rabbis who have coordinated the programs that we have had. This is the fourth of 4 programs in this series, tracing really starting from the history of women entering the rabbinate to different areas. And some of our previous panelists are here to really share the vision of what the rabbinate looks like and what we as women rabbis have offered. So I'm actually going to just share, without listing all the names out loud, the names of all of my colleagues and friends, our colleagues who have worked on these programs. So we find ourselves about halfway through the counting of the Omer on the Hebrew calendar. And the Omer is the journey from Pesach to Shavuot, from redemption to revelation. And I think the entire process of counting each day of the Omer reminds us that our lives, in the largest sense, are also a journey. And when we talk about the approach to the anniversary of Rabbi Sally Priestand's ordination, we have called it a journey because this is our journey and we are all part of that journey. And so I add to the beautiful prayer that Julie and Jen shared for us, Julie read for us, the prayer that we all, whether we are the rabbis on this call or our members of our congregations and communities, that we are on journeys and that we appreciate that each step of the way brings us closer to our own goals and the goals of our communities. So we say, Toda Rabah, Nisiya Tova, have a wonderful trip, if you will. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good evening.